Okay, welcome everybody. Today, what we're going to talk about is First Corinthians or 2 Corinthians 8, rather, and this is a pretty brief chapter. In words, it's not brief, but in concepts, there's only a handful of concepts there, but they're very important. So we're probably going to be through it pretty quick. It deals with the subject of Christians donating money to other Christians in need. Okay. Now, it's a pretty sensitive topic in a lot of ways. For me, I find this to be a sensitive topic because I come from a long line of very stingy people. Okay, we are not a family of donators. Historically, you got to go way back before you can find a family member who was a cheerful giver. We are not cheerful givers. Okay, it's not natural biologically, I think, for us to be giving. And in the number of family members who have become pastors, they didn't do a really great job because they were notorious for being very money-grubbing, stingy, ungenerous, but asking others for money. The result of that, because of bad examples, my grandfather, my mother's father, who had a big influence on me, was very anti-Christian, extremely so. His mom was hyper-religious. His grandfather was the pastor of the church. And he saw nothing good from Christianity. So much so that he was the first evangelical atheist that I ever met. I grew up with an evangelical atheist. And the reason for my bias against church and against religion came from him. Okay. We literally, when I stayed, because I lived with them for a while, after my parents' divorce, I stayed there for a while. And then I went there, and summers I spent there too. And on Sundays, we would listen to Oral Roberts on the radio, okay, for critique purposes. So he could point out, see, this religion stuff, it's all bull. It's all bull. You watch. Wait till the end, and they're going to throw in, they're after your money. It's all about money. And every time, that's exactly, yeah, you need healing, send us this, that, there. But, you can donate to us. And then, people like Oral Roberts and Robert Tilton or the big televangelist out there. And what do they all have in common is they all try to guilt you into sending them your money.
Gulfstream Jets is what.
You got it. Yeah. So that was, and the thing is, and it really made an impact on me. And he says, you know what? They have no credibility. They don't really believe the nonsense they're spitting out. These people are sheep for giving these people their money. And that was drilled in, is that you have no credibility. If you're giving this message about God, this invisible person in the sky, and you want us to believe it, and yet you're getting money for making people believe. In other words, the more people that believe, the more money you make. There's your motivation, and that's why religion is a thing, because it makes money. So I grew up with that. So, when I became a Christian later, I had to keep it secret. I didn't want my grandfather to find out. I didn't want my stepfather to find out, because both of them were vehemently anti-Christian. All right? Now, they were so strong in their opinions, I didn't even know that my mother and grandmother were Christians. They basically suppressed their Christianity so much because of the anti-Christian influence of these men that I had no idea. I thought both my parents were non-Christians. I didn't know that either. I didn't know that my mother was a Christian. I didn't know that my grandmother was a Christian. They didn't talk about it. Why didn't you share with me how to become a Christian? And when I became a Christian, I was sharing my faith with them. And they're like, I know that. It's like, why didn't you tell me? I grew up in it's family, and you never once told me about this. You talked about God, but you didn't explain how to actually. I don't remember anything about how Jesus died for all of my sins and that the past, present, and future, and all I had to do was ask him in. I mean, that would have been nice to know, okay? Now, after I got active, they came out of the closet and were very vocal, and eventually my stepfather became a Christian, okay? But anyway, I grew up in this really anti-Christian environment that was specifically justified because these preachers constantly asked for money, and therefore it wrecked their credibility. So the reason I give that story is that when Christians focus so much on getting people to make donations, when pastors do that, it does affect credibility. Okay, it does. And when I used to do a lot more I do a lot of public speaking now, but I used to do public speaking in churches. When I did my research on the Shroud of Turin, for years, I would tour churches and do talks on the Shroud of Turin, proving, basically providing evidence for the resurrection, right? I did that a lot. And I always made sure to say, I don't take up a collection. I don't want any money for this. I don't want anybody thinking that I'm doing this for money, because my point is, the goal here is to strengthen the faith of believers and to help people who don't have faith in God. I want them to see that there's a reason to have faith. This is real. That's my point. That's why I did it. I don't want to make a penny from this. And usually, I would get compliance, and it's okay, right? We're not going to take up a collection. I realize you don't want any money. Cool, right? On several occasions, they took up a collection anyway. They just kept it. They would say, "Oh, let's help Brother Bill out here and take up a collection." Wasn't that a wonderful talk he just did on the Shroud? Aren't you blessed? Reach way down and let's help him out. And the last time it happened, I was seething. I was so mad. I explicitly told them, no, no, no. And they did it anyway. And of course, they didn't offer it to me afterwards. Oh, you're right, you don't want this, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And you use this as an opportunity to put money. And it's like, do you realize, my credibility was just damaged. All this work I put into this, and you just damaged my credibility here. All right, a lot. And I was very upset by it. Now, that particular talk is one of the main talks on YouTube, and now it's been seen by tens of thousands of people. So, so I had, maybe 300 or 400 people in the audience, and I got several thousand who didn't have to donate. So the talk still did a lot of good, okay? But still, at the time, I was very upset about this, okay? Because it's a credibility issue. It's a credibility issue. Now, Paul was aware. And I really love Paul. I appreciate Paul's intellect. I appreciate Paul's sensitivity to God. Because in this letter, he's going to tell the Corinthians, all right, I'd like you to donate some money to some poor Christians over here. But what we're going to see in this letter is he is really sensitive, and he overstates it many times. He says, look, this money is not going to me. In fact, I'm going to make double and triple sure that this money goes to these poor Christians over here, and that I don't get a penny of it. I do not want to risk my credibility by asking you for money. And you're going to see this in the letter. Never before have I appreciated it like I did. When I went through 2 Corinthians 8, I'm going, wow. Because churches always point to these Bible verses, give and it shall be given to you, and so forth, and use your tithe, and they're trying to use Bible verses to suck money out of you. And even if it's for a good cause, if you harp on that, it really looks bad, okay? And I love this where Paul's doing it, and I'm going, this is the way. Paul is very clear. If you don't want to give, don't. If you can't afford it, don't give what you can't afford. And I'm not getting a penny, and I am making sure that I have multiple people in on this, so we keep everybody honest. He is very aware of how this looks manipulative. And if pastors would just study 2 Corinthians 8, this is the model of how to coax people. I think Christians should give, okay? But you can't tell them how to give or where to give or how much to give. All right, and just look at Paul's example here. This is how you bring up the subject of giving, all right? Not through manipulation, not through guilt tripping, but just explaining, hey, yeah, God does bless you if you give. He does. But it's up to you how much you want to give, who you want to give to, and so forth. God tells you to be generous, okay, and he leaves it open, all right? Yeah?
Maybe you'll cover this as you go along, but does this chapter address giving for non-believers in hopes they become believers?
It does not, but I think it's still, because that's still, when we give to the body of the church, to the work of God, I think that's covered and by other passages. So this, I think that many of these principles can't, because I give to evangelical groups as well, and I think that's giving to God just as much. So I think we need to, in our giving, want to make sure that I think it's important that we give to evangelical causes. We give to the poor, okay, as well. And that's it, I think. To the poor and to evangelical causes. So is there any other cause here? I think that's it, because, people, to the needy and to evangelical. Yeah, because the sick, yeah, exactly. All right, let's get started here. All right. Now, friends, I want to report on the surprising and generous ways in which God is working in the churches in Macedonia Providence. So keep in mind, the Philippians were really generous, good people. Some populations, their culture is just naturally pro-Christian. Columbus discovered that when he landed in the West Indies first. Those first Indians, though they weren't really Indians, obviously, but those those first people, the Caribs, well, not the Caribs were evil, but the first Caribbean tribe that he met, and I forgot the name of the tribe.
Was it Arawak?
No. We're in the Caribbean. In the Caribbean, yeah. But they were like, they didn't wear clothes, but they were like, they lived by treat others as you want to be treated. And they lived by that. With no Bible, they lived out biblical principles. It was the most morally upright culture he'd ever seen. And it was in their culture. They were trusting in spite of the fact that they were being terrorized by the Caribs. The Caribs were eating them. They were eating them. It was like, remember the time machine? And he goes into the future, and you have those underground people who are eating the people who are walking around eating fruit. All right, remember that? You guys are all, I'm not the oldest one here, right? Remember? Yeah. Okay, all right. Yeah, but they were living in that state where they were doing all this kindness and treating everybody well and everything. And you had these evil Carib tribes who would make raids on them, take their people, and eat them. All right? So that's what but they were still nice. And there are some cultures that are like that. The Philippians, I mean, they're culturally, when they adopted Christianity, they were super generous. In spite of the fact that they were poor, they took it upon themselves when hard times hit. And some of the members of the churches in the area were suffering. They dug down deep and gave, even though they could barely afford it. And Paul was like, wow, I didn't even ask you guys to do this. You are so nice. And he was so impressed by that him and Titus got to talking. And he says, you know what? If other Christians emulated this behavior, God would be very pleased with that. And wouldn't it be great if Christians behave like that? Because that's what happened in the book of Acts, where everybody shared. It says, wouldn't that be nice? Because that was the Jerusalem church. Wouldn't it be great if the non-Jerusalem church would behave that way too, like these Philippians did? So that's the setting. Okay? All right, let's go on.
Taino Indians.
Taino.
Indian, I looked it up.
Oh, they were the Taino. Okay, thank you. Okay, Taino, very good. That's an excellent. There was a book written on Christopher Columbus that it was so enlightening in my views of Christopher Columbus. The guy was an amazing man. Christopher Columbus. We deserve Columbus Day. I mean, that he deserves praise. He was gifted. I mean, he was probably one of the best navigators in history. He could navigate through a tsunami. I mean, seriously, that guy was he would stay up all night because he was the only one that could drive that boat through rough weather. And he would stay up for days because he couldn't trust anybody else to do it because he was that good. So anyway, but.
Was he a believer too?
Oh, I mean, okay, was he a believer? I'm just going to briefly say this because I'm so impressed with the guy. But he was a super believer in a time when there weren't very many believers. Although he was Catholic, but hey, there are good Catholics. There are Catholics out there who love the Lord. All right, I got some friends who are like, all Catholics are evil, and it's like, no, they're not all evil. Just like, were you going to say that all Presbyterians are good? Are you crazy? There's no denomination made of solid believers and nothing else. It just doesn't exist. All denominations have their problems. Christopher Columbus was a common-born man, and yet took it upon himself to learn Latin and Greek and all. I don't know if it was Greek, but he knew he could read the Bible in Latin fluently, and he was one of those few people that outside of the laity, outside of the priest, who read his Bible and tried to live by it. Okay, his whole point of doing that, his whole purpose for looking for, he thought his thoughts were wrong. He read Marco Polo, and Marco Polo talked about the gold in Japan and how it was everywhere. So he was looking for Japan, and he thought that's where it's going. And why did he want the gold? Because he wanted to liberate Israel from the Muslims. That's what he wanted. He wanted to fund another crusade so that Christians could liberate Israel from the Muslims, because he felt it was the end times, because the Constantine church had fallen to the Muslims. They thought that was signs of the Antichrist, and he thought that the end was near. And in the Bible, there is a temple in Jerusalem, and it's under Israeli, and so he wanted to make sure that Jesus had a place to land. He wanted to make sure that Jesus could come back, but he can't come back until Israel is a state. And he wanted to use that gold to give to Queen Isabella so she could fund another holy war and go back and liberate Israel from the Muslims. That was his whole point. If you look at his diary and everything, he did not want the gold for himself. Okay, he was not just this gold-hungry monster. He was specifically, his whole target was, the Lord's going to come back, and I want to make sure I play a part, and I'm going to liberate Jerusalem for him.
Didn't his contemporaries kind of lie about him?
Oh, yeah, we could go. I don't get me, because I'll talk about Columbus all the time today, and I don't want to do that. But yes, it's a really interesting story. We should have a Bible study on Columbus. Okay, anyway, let me go on. Fierce troubles came down on the people of those churches, pushing them to the very limit. The trial exposed their true colors. They were incredibly happy, though desperately poor. The pressure triggered something totally unexpected, an outpouring of pure and generous gifts. I was there and saw it for myself. They gave offerings of whatever they could, far more than they could afford, pleading for the privilege of helping out in the relief of poor Christians. It's like, whoa, I couldn't believe it. We didn't even ask them. And they just, here. It was amazing. Never would have expected that from non-Jews. This was totally spontaneous, entirely their own idea, and caught us completely off guard. What explains it was that they had first given themselves unreservedly to God and to us. So they were loyal to God and to us. That was one thing. The other giving simply flowed out of the purposes of God working in their lives. So in other words, it was a God thing. So yeah, they were loyal to us, but also God was taking care of those poor Christians. God uses believers to bless other believers. So they didn't have a choice in some ways. Okay? Sometimes we don't realize that when we're talking to people, we don't think of where our words come from because they just flow out. I don't know what I'm going to say next. I find that amazing. I have no idea what's going to come out of my mouth. None. There's no plan. I have no script. And out it comes. Where does that come from? Scientifically, we have no answer for that. I think it comes from the spirit world, mostly from my soul. There are other factors out there. And as a Christian, one of those other factors is the Holy Spirit. And sometimes you'll find yourself talking to somebody and stuff will come out of you and they're like, wow, I really needed to hear that. And that sometimes is the Holy Spirit says, you know what, let me drive for a while. And you say things or do things that God motivates you to do. Okay? This past week, I had a friend who has some questionable practices sometimes, and one of the questionable practices was that she decided to drive for a while with no car insurance because car insurance is expensive and she was low on money. So she was out driving without car insurance, and the police pulled her over, and she was like, well, I was following the speed limit, what's wrong? Do you have car insurance? And she's like, well, and he knew she did. No. Most officers will impound your car and you'll get a big fine for that. That's the standard protocol. If they don't haul you off to jail, it's very dangerous to other people. It's selfish too to drive without car insurance, because if you hit somebody, one of the guys in my Bible study was driving in Detroit and got hit by an uninsured driver, and now he's dealing with brain damage and there's no help for him. Okay? Because the other person had no insurance, so there's nothing you can do, because they were driving without insurance. And they caused the accident, ran right through a red light and T-boned him. Okay? So it is bad to drive without insurance. So the officer was like, well, you know what? This is a really serious thing and I should write you up, but I'm going to give you a warning. I'm going to tell you right now, please get car insurance, because if this happens, if anybody else had stopped you, you would be in big trouble. And he gave her a warning. And she was thinking, wow, was that God protecting me? Or is that normal? And so she did something which I thought was very dangerous, is she went on Reddit and asked a bunch of police officers, do you guys normally give warnings for that? What do you think the response was? She had to delete it because the hate from all of those police officers, the hate that she got was, are you kidding me? Zero. It says, lady, you hit the jackpot. Nobody would do that. If you were to hit somebody and that officer would lose his job over that. If you did not get it and somebody else stopped him and you still didn't have insurance, or if you got into an accident, that officer risked his career for you. And so what I believe happened, and I can't prove this, but I believe that officer was probably a Christian, and that was God taking over, blessing her because, she was poor and everything, but God was giving her a warning through that officer. And I think as Christians, we get used to bless other Christians, and that's what Paul is talking about here. So partly you were loyal to us and you were loyal to God, so you thought that was the right thing to do, but also God, those poor Christians who were desperate and praying, that was God answering their prayers through you guys, through the Philippians, through the Macedonians, okay?
It found that people of average to lower means tend to be more generous.
Relatively speaking, yes. Yeah, relatively speaking, yes, I would say that. Yeah, okay. All right. That's what prompted us to ask Titus to bring the relief offering to your attention so that what was so well begun could be finished up. You do so well in so many things. You trust God, you're articulate, you're insightful, you're passionate, you love us. Now, do your best in this too. It says, you guys are great at everything else. And it's like, look, you guys want in on this? Because these guys are really suffering over here. And, these are your fellow believers. And I'm giving you guys the opportunity. Do you want to give something as well? Okay. You do good in other areas. I'm not trying to order you around against your will. So this is where Paul goes into the apologetics part. He says, look, all right, I realize how this can look. All right, I am not using my authority as an apostle to make you do something you don't want to do. So let's get that out of the way right there. Anybody watch Gordon Peterson's Bible exposition when he went over the book of Genesis? He said something I found interesting, and he says some things sometimes that really get me thinking. It's like, I like that. He makes you think. But he brought a new take on do not take the Lord thy God's name in vain. And certainly it does mean you shouldn't be swearing using God's name. I think that's true. But there's also the idea of claiming that you have God's authority when you don't. Claiming that you are speaking God's truth when you're not. And clergy and people under the guise of religion, period, have been doing that forever. And God's like, don't do that. Don't claim you're speaking for me when you're not. Okay? So when you use God as a way to enrich yourself, that's a bad thing. That's a very bad thing. Okay? All right. So I'm not trying to order you around against your will, but by bringing in the Macedonians' enthusiasm as a stimulus to your love, I'm hoping to bring the best out of you. You are familiar with the generosity of our Master, Jesus Christ. Rich as he was, he gave it all away for us. In one stroke, he became poor and we became rich. And it's like, wow, the richest being in the universe became poor to help us. And we're followers of him. So, being generous, when you choose to be generous, you are emulating Christ. All right. So that's a very important thing. And Jesus was very clear. Give and it shall be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running out all over. The manner in which you give is as generous as you are, that's how generous God's going to be to you. Now, I've been a Christian for a very, very, very long time. And certainly I've noticed in my life that during the periods when I've been most generous, God has been generous with me. As I give out, stuff comes in. That's how it works. And still, it's getting easier, I must say, but that whole thing, do I ever feel like I've made it to the cheerful giver status? I have a hard time with that. Am I a cheerful giver? Giving away. Am I cheerful about losing money? Relatively speaking, I'm more cheerful about giving money than losing money. So I can say that with a straight face. I am more cheerful about giving money than losing money. In terms of feeling cheerful about, oh boy, somebody needs money. Here you go. Not exactly. So, but I do recognize the principle, and I'm getting to the point where I realize, okay, if God has been generous with me, I need to be generous with others, because if I don't want to be poor again, this is what I have to do, And so I recognize that, and I'm going, does that qualify me as being cheerful? It's as cheerful as I can, I think as long as you do it, that's what's important. Just do it, and I think sometimes. For me, I have to set up a thing so it automatically comes out of my check, because if I have to sit down and actually write the check, that hurts. But if it comes out automatically, it doesn't hurt. Okay? It doesn't hurt. So anyway, I'm just saying. All right, so Jesus was our example, and Paul uses that. So here's what I think. The best thing you can do right now is to finish what you started last year and not let those good intentions grow stale. Your heart's been in the right place all along. You've got what it takes to finish it up, so go do it. Once the commitment is clear, you do what you can, not what you can't. So God say, look, tell us what you can give, but give what you can, not what you can't. Don't dig down so hard that you can't pay your mortgage. Okay? The heart regulates the hands. This isn't so others can take it easy while you sweat it out. I love that he says that. Okay, we're not asking you to give money so others can be on Easy Street and eat steak while you're eating ramen noodles. Okay, that's not what this is about. These people are desperate. They've got no food. So I want you to be aware that the money you're giving isn't so people who are upper middle class can make it to high class, which is what you see in so many scenarios. When you see what some of these charities, what their fees are, and what the upper, it's ridiculous. It's like, I don't want to give to something like that. No, if I'm going to give into the poor, I like to give to the actual poor, and not 90% goes to the person who set up the charity. That doesn't seem right. Okay? All right. The heart regulates the hands. Okay. No, you're shoulder to shoulder with them all the way. Your surplus matching their deficit. Their surplus matching your deficit. In the end, you come out even. As it is written, nothing left over to the one with the most, nothing lacking to the one with the least. So he's saying this is how the family of God works as a family. If somebody in the family is suffering want and another family member has some, then you donate. And so that as a family, we are all lifted. And it goes the other way too, because just because you have enough now doesn't mean the future might bring this. And so it's like, we balance each other out. Some have gifts to handle the people who are low, and then when they're gifted, they can give you something back. I thank God for giving Titus the same devoted concern for you that I have. He was most considerate of how we felt, but his eagerness to go to you and help out with this relief offering is his own idea. So Titus says, look, I will go ask the Corinthians for the money. I'm willing to go take up the collection myself. Okay. All right, we're sending a companion along with him, someone very popular in the churches for his preaching of the message. But there's far more to him than popularity. He's rock solid trustworthy. The church has handpicked him to go with us as we travel about doing this work of sharing God's gifts to honor God as well as we can, taking every precaution against scandal. So Titus is going. Titus is from Paul. Titus is one of Paul's right-hand men. But in addition, one of the Bible teachers from the churches that are afflicted. So why do we have two people collecting this money? Let's keep it honest here. All right, I don't want there to be any hint of scandal. I want to make sure that there's nobody going to say that, Paul took 25% off the top. Okay, look, Titus took half of it, And he said, we collected $100,000 and we gave $50,000. And then say that, no. And so we got the people that need the money are in on the collection of it. So this is going to be very transparent. No hint of scandal. See how careful Paul is being here? I never saw that before. I have never been in a church where they talked about this passage. If I did, I don't remember it. I've never been in a Bible study. I've never been in a church where they talked, where you look and you go, and it's very clear. Paul is aware, look, this can destroy your reputation. This can totally undermine your credibility. If you're going around asking for money and then it goes to you, okay, that's a bad thing. That's a bad thing. So yes, Christians ought to give, but be very careful how you ask for that. Be very careful how you teach on that. We don't want anyone suspecting us of taking 1 penny of this money for ourselves. Can't say it clearer than that. All right? We're being as careful in our reputation with the public as our reputation with God. That's why we're sending another trusted friend along. He's proved his dependability many times over and carries on as energetically as the day he started. He's heard much about you and like what he's heard, so much so that he can't wait to get there. So this other guy I'm sending is rock solid as well. You know, look, I'm telling you right now, I promise on my honor, there is nothing bad going on here. What I'm telling you is we're collecting the money for the poor Christians over here. It's going to go to them. We've got 2 people here that are coming from opposite ends. One's from the church, one's from me, to keep this honest. Okay? Now, you can't 100% guarantee against scandal. All you got to do is, if you trust me, then trust me. Because, you know, it's just, that's what he's saying here. I don't need to say anything further about Titus. We've been close associates in this work of serving you for a long time. The brothers who travel with him are delegates from churches, a real credit to Christ. Show them what you're made of, the love I've been taking up in the churches. Let them see it for themselves. So it looks like it's not just one of this Bible study teacher, but also some other members from these churches. So the people that are suffering, they're in on the collection of it. So you're not there's not a middleman. There's not like a secret middleman here who can take a bunch off the top. The people that want the money, that need the money, are in on the collection to make sure that every dime goes to the people that need it. So I love the carefulness of this. I really do. It's like, thank you, Paul. Thank you, Paul. Because, you know, I felt guilty about this for a long time. I've always been, because of the way I was raised, I guess, I've always been suspicious of pastors who talk about money all the time. And I've seen some really bad examples. When I was working in Florida, we used to go to I did sales in Florida back when I was a child. And I was probably 19 or 20. I think I was 20. And because I was selling Bibles, you know, for Southwestern companies, one of those college jobs where you go door to door selling Bible stories and Bible dictionaries and stuff. And so we would go to make contacts. We would go to the churches every Sunday, a different church. And I would say 90% of the churches were kind of bad. And one of the worst things that I see is where they make people get up and give your money in front of everybody so the whole church can see how much you're giving. I'm going, is that manipulative or what? And I used to I would just burn with that. And I'm like, this is disgusting. And should I feel guilty about this? Because the Bible does say to give, but this, you know, I don't know where it's in the Bible that this is wrong, but I knew that's wrong. This is wrong. When you're coercing people to give you money, that's a bad thing. All right? And I love that Paul is very, very, very aware to complete, as by Paul's example, it's like, look, if you're asking people to give, you better be very careful. Your credibility is on the line. All right? If you want to be accused of scandal, then treat this very loose and just go around asking money for yourself and, you know, where you're collecting in secret and giving in secret. It's like, you better be very transparent, because when somebody's giving money, if they suspect scandal, that money, that's going to dry up real quick, for one thing. And also, what's worse is your credibility as in other words, if you're a Bible study teacher or a pastor, and there's some scandal involving money, all your teaching is for nothing, because your credibility just went down the toilet. Everything you say has been suspect. Do you really believe what you're talking about? Or are you talking about this God stuff because of money? All right. So I love this. This is a great chapter. Again, not a whole lot of concepts, but the concepts that's presented here is exquisitely important. All right. All right. Any questions?